Well, my name is Carroll Edward Lahniers, and I live in Cincinnati, Ohio. Well, I'm a clinical psychologist and have been since 1971, having gotten my PhD at the University of Cincinnati, arriving here from Illinois at the age of 18 at Miami University, which is where I did my undergraduate work. And I'm from a little town in Illinois called Decatur, Illinois, which is used on the sign going into Decatur, Illinois, 78,000 people, the soybean capital of the world. So that's my legacy. When I went back to Decatur a number of years after I'd moved away, because I did get out as soon as I could, I went back about 15 years later, and the sign Decatur, Illinois, 120,000, quote, the pride of the prairie, end quote. So somebody got through to them about the PR value of being soybean people. So that was my upbringing. Small town Illinois, always looking for the next tornado. I mean, it was flat land. And when I got to Ohio, I have to tell you, it was like, what is this? These hills? Because I've never really seen hills, and I've lived to the best of my ability. I've always tried to live on the top of a hill ever since. And I am still on the top of a hill in Mount Adams. So my work is primarily psychotherapy as a psychologist, and I've been doing it for, well, since 71. So how many years is that now? That's 50 some years? 71, 81, 91, 2002, 40, 47 years, 48 years I've been doing therapy. And I still love it. I'm 75 years old, turned 75 last month. And I'm still working, trying to cut an hour off my schedule a day. So I'm seeing like maybe 6 people a day now. And I still really enjoy my work, which is unusual, I think, for most people my age. You're not going to see a lot of people who are still working who are 75. I don't know any psychologists who still are. So I must have really been in the right profession. And I'm so enormously grateful that I've had this kind of a life of being able to help people and getting right in there with them and trying to find out better solutions for life issues. And I come through a lot of different types of particular focuses as a therapist. Among them, for a number of years, I did a lot of work with people who were having trouble with areas of sexual compulsion or relationship compulsion. And in 1984, I started a program in Cincinnati because of a particular patient that I'd been seeing who had had a terrible time with certain kinds of excessive sexual behaviors that were really becoming quite dangerous and could have, in fact, caused him to get killed. And during the course of our talking together in therapy, we both came to the conclusion that what was happening to him really was operating very much kind of like a drug, this sexual pressure to be out doing these things that were really, really sad. So he and I, in talking about this, naming it kind of an addiction, we decided to follow the model because he was also in a program called Alcoholics Anonymous. And we decided to take up that particular model that I knew about, of course, because I'd worked with alcoholic people for many, many years. And we borrowed that model and wrote up a program that we were going to attempt to bring other people into to work with him as he had been helped by people in his program with Alcoholics Anonymous. And we set up a time. I went across the street to a little church, and a wonderful minister named Reverend Sinclair. He acknowledged our legitimacy right away and said that we could use the cellar or the basement of his church. So we set a Saturday date and started in our Saturday meetings, 2 to 3:30. And I said, because I was concerned about the question of anonymity and protecting people who were coming into something that would be this novel and possibly an invitation to people who would maybe want to take advantage of these people or who would be wanting to intrude upon their privacy. So for 5 years, I sat every Saturday afternoon with the group and kind of was a gatekeeper, if you will. Many Saturdays, I was the only one there. I kind of like to think of myself as kind of a non-member member, but we eventually, after about 3 years, the people started to come in. They would come and they would go. And we eventually were able to get a person who was able to say, I have identified myself as sober, meaning I am in a period of remission regarding my bottom line addiction. And that kind of got the group more solidified. And at that point, well, soon thereafter, I excused myself from the group and moved on my merry way, glad to recover my Saturdays. And the group, interestingly enough, at the time that I started this group in 1984, there were a number of other movements around this country that were doing the same thing. And it's really hard to understand why, except for the fact that there was such a turmoil going on with this disease that was going on, which was HIV. And other people were starting groups that were very much the same model as what this group was that I started, which it stole my thunder, but I was glad to have it stolen in the sense that there was a increasing reckoning of the power that the attempt to fend off fear has in another dimension called compulsion, sexual compulsion, or relationship compulsion. And that group has continued to operate up to today. And there are many, the group is named Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous, and there are many meetings going on around the greater Cincinnati area. And the people whom I know who are in the groups, whenever they go out of town, are able to find groups. So it's a network. And it's been a very, very satisfying experience to have participated in the building up of something of that, of that magnitude of assistance that people can get by forming communities with other people who are in similar straits. And I do therapy in any number of areas that might include working with couples, and primarily in the last 15 years, I've been working in the area of self-identification around areas of anxiety and overemphasis upon self-consciousness. This has been a huge area that I've found most people that I know have some difficulty with in terms of feeling far too great sensitivity to themselves, to the conscious awareness of the self. And in that sense, I've worked out a series of, I actually wrote a workbook which helps people to be able to identify the areas that are contributing to their difficulty with self-consciousness and how to move away from that self-consciousness to an area of self-fulfillment that involves being and living in the content as opposed to the process. So a lot of my work is about helping people to be able to move away from self-consciousness. And that really would summarize my my most prevalent interest now as a therapist.
Do you want to talk about some of your theories that are in that workbook?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. The name of my workbook is Creating a Self That Works. Creating a Self That Works. And I think it's a good description of what I've seen in many people in my experience as a therapist is they don't have a self that works well. In fact, I didn't have a self that worked well as a child. I think many people in my line of work tend to follow the path that they've got to that profession and trying to make it into something that their own experiences and maybe their own overcoming is able to help others to be able to overcome. And this area of self is predicated on the notion that we all, as a general rule, we all need to be operating in certain ways in order to be able to have a level of comfort and lack of self-awareness of ourselves. And I began to understand this early on in my therapy experience in terms of talking to people and finding that there were people who seemed to really, really have that quality of unawareness of the self. And it is an extremely refreshing thing to be around people like that who are able to just simply be and not be carrying around a lot of baggage about their past or baggage about their future or baggage about their performances, etc. And so what I started doing was annotating and talking to people, and these are not necessarily people whom I saw in therapy, but some were people that I saw in therapy because after all, people who come into therapy I consider to be among the elect, not the impoverished. But I started to talk to people about what these qualities are that allow them to have this seeming freedom from self-consciousness, self-awareness, self-anxiety. So I documented, and I started to, because I'm a good categorizer, I like things to be in order, I like to put things in boxes, and so I began to categorize the kind of things that people were talking to me about themselves. And I was able to identify about 9 or 10 different areas of pursuit, you might call it, that separate people who are doing very, very well in terms of their confidence in themselves from people who aren't. And in that fashion, I sat down and wrote, in 2 weeks' time, I sat and wrote like a madman. I wrote my treatise on creating a self that works. And what I've discovered is this. People who are doing well tend to be dependent. And 25 years ago, the word dependency was a very bad word. I think many people have been deterred from even thinking about the word dependency in a positive way when the culture was in such a fixation about people being negatively dependent. But what I found is that the people who have selves that are fully functioning tend to be people who have dependencies upon which they are reliant, and reliant in a very, very full-blown way. Dependency is another word for belief. And I think that we can just kind of jump into that discussion of dependency / belief on any kind of a level that we want to. But what I found about dependency is it's a universal trait. Whether you are dependent upon things that allow you to have a reduction in self-confidence, or whether you're relying upon situations which cause you to feel like you're able to escape from self-consciousness, dependency is the name of the game wherever we look. So my dependencies have been about things that and activities that one needs to do in order to be able to eliminate this notion of self-consciousness. But the first part of getting to positive dependencies, I found, is being able to find out what are the kinds of dependencies that people have which keep them shackled to self-consciousness. And these are what I call negative dependencies. So in my book, what I first of all describe is what most people have in their lives are these kinds of beliefs that they carry around with them that cause them to be pretty doggone unhappy. Because here's the thing, many of the beliefs that people have as adults have been learned at an early stage, whether they were taught by their parents, whether there were incidents in their lives which were so dramatically presented to them that they developed a belief about something, perhaps a fear-based belief, a fright or something on this order. But most everybody carries around beliefs that they got when they were quite young in their lives. And these beliefs had, early in their lives, had a certain function, which the individual believed because it was true to them. It was true in terms of the events or the things that were told to them by their parents, by their teachers, whether it would be shaming them, ridiculing them. These kinds of things created very deeply held beliefs. As adults, most of us carry around these same old beliefs, what I call functionally autonomous beliefs. So why do I say functionally autonomous? Because these beliefs basically no longer have any sustaining value in terms of being based upon a truth of function. So they become autonomous. What we're trying to do in terms of helping people learn how to step away from these negative beliefs is to get the understanding, a cognitive understanding, that what we're carrying around in ourselves are things that feel very real, they feel very strong, but they're no longer based upon, upon factual evidence of sustaining that functionality. So what the start of the program that I try to impart with the client who's working on this is we have to begin to relinquish beliefs which no longer are serving us. As we go over these negative beliefs, which is my job at first in working with a person, is what are the negative beliefs that you have? I've got a huge list of them I could go over if you were interested in seeing what they are. But the kind of things that people won't like me if I disagree with them would be a negative belief. I think we could say in adulthood that sometimes that may be true, but that is not a truth. And the child who grows up believing that disagreeing with other people is going to impose upon him some kind of punishment, then begins to avoid getting into those activities which could liberate himself from that, because he carries around this functionally autonomous dependency. So that's an example of what we start to look at when I can get people to articulate what those beliefs are. Then we move on into looking at what the dependencies are that are going to release that person from this servitude to these functionally autonomous beliefs. I don't know whether you want me to go over the kinds of dependencies that we're talking about, but what I'm trying to express here really is the notion of dependency as being universal. And my sense of dependency as a therapist is in helping people develop dependencies which serve them in a way to release them from pain.
Can you maybe list the positive dependencies just as a list, or telling us a brief word or two about each of them? Because I think it really does represent your beliefs about positive life and positive connection.
Okay. At the start of the list, what I talk about that I think is basic to the self is the dependency that I call originality. And I've named all my dependencies with a Y on the end so that I've kept them ordered and nicely compulsive. So originality really is about origins. That what I have found is that in order to create a belief system that really works, it has to be your own. It has to be something that you have come to from some knowledge base or experiential learning that has allowed you to say, this I have come to see is true. Not what I've been told is true, but what I have come to through my own experiencing and, let's say, talking with a therapist or talking with other people or just in living. I have found that this is something that is a true way of operating. So the originality dependency is the key to the whole thing, and that it has to be yours. It can't be that has been defined by others. So it's an ownership question. From there, we go into what are the specifics of how I have to be able to behave in order to be high functioning in this way. One of the first dependencies that I talk about is what I call energy. And energy, and these, I think you will see as I'm telling you that these are all pretty doggone common sense. I'm not trying to talk through your hat and make you think I'm highfalutin. I mean, I think these are things that anybody can nest in a daily positive way. The dependency of energy is about what you do and how much energy you put into it. Energy is a sine qua non of the whole thing, and that is you have to try hard. Anything you do, you have to try to do to the best of your ability. And people who do things to the best of their ability get a pass, as far as I'm concerned. They get a pass meaning that it's not going to necessarily be what they wanted it to be, but if they've given their energies to it, they can rest assured that they did what they were supposed to be doing. But that, of course, is then followed by the second dependency, which is called efficiency. Efficiency is with us all the time, whether we know it or not, and that is how much and how do we organize our time in order to be able to take care of these things that we are trying to take care of. Efficiency limits the amount of time that energy can be put into a situation, because if we're looking at the things that the energy dependency is dependent upon, which are all these things that you're responsible for, that's what energy is about, taking responsibility and being on board with it. So the efficiency dependency asks you to parcel out your time in such a fashion that you're able to address these various responsibilities that have been put on, that you've put on your list that you're accountable for. So the energy dependency operates hand in glove with how much time that dependency has been allotted to be able to work with. Well, that gives a perfect out for perfectionism. Many people I have found don't start things because they are worried they're not going to be able to finish them. And what efficiency allows you to do in terms of bonding with your energy dependency is to cut out from that activity when you are required to, and continue to go back to it on a repeated basis until that activity has come to some sort of fruition. But it doesn't cause you to have to feel that you're going to be penalized if you don't do that particular job perfectly. Then we move into the dependency that I call fallibility. Fallibility. This is a dependency that has to do with what we see going on in our world and how we respond to it. That things, well, here's the generalization of fallibility. Things are only as good as they present themselves to be. They're not better than that. And so many things that we run across in our lives are imperfect and are not the way we would have them be. And we have to begin to take account of the realities of the world that we live in and stop beating ourselves up when things aren't the way we want them to be. The dependency following fallibility is what I call predictability. And in the predictability dependency, that's the area in which you start to assess what kinds of outcomes would be possible for you in terms of pursuing certain paths, taking into account the reality, and then taking into account your own realities and your own potentials for being able to overcome is the assessment of predictability. How can I predictably impact upon a situation that I'm looking to move forward with? The dependency of civility. Civility in all ways, all the time. Civility is treating people the way you want to be treated. It's the golden rule. Anything that comes your way, if you are treating people with respect, tends to be a lot easier to manage the outcome of. And I think that is such a profound statement of how we need to behave wherever we are and in whatever context. For instance, let's take the dependency of conflictuality. Conflictuality is that is just what it sounds like. It's those situations that you would have some kind of a disagreement with someone else about some anything, because that's called conflict. Conflict is a very scary subject in our culture. People avoid it more than almost any area that I find in terms of messing up in their lives. They don't go forward with dealing with things that are important to their well-being, and they're typically afraid that if they get into a conflict, it's going to become explosive, it's going to result in some sort of disaster, that they're going to lose their temper, etc. All kinds of fear of outcomes on conflict. It's absolutely imperative for the self to be able to normalize the word conflict, to be able to see it in every day, every way there is going to be some level of disagreement or a separation of oneself from some other situation that needs to be managed in some way. And if people can get on board with that and see how unbelievably normal it is, then they can start to see it as something that they can begin to engage with, especially in the context of the dependency of civility. Because anytime something comes up that you need to address, which is about a difference, you can do it if you use your civility dependency in such a fashion that it allows the conversation to go forth. The dependency of artistry. Artistry is central to the self. Artistry is about what you're able to do. What have you been gifted with? What are the things that you've been able to, as a child, maybe do well and do effortlessly? And most people I have found disregard artistry in themselves. There are so many wonderful things that people are able to do that they don't talk about or even think about, until I sit them down and say, well, let's just look at the kind of things that you're able to do. Let's not put a capital letter on it. No, this is small letter. But what can you do? Can you tell me some of the things that you wouldn't even think about that you're able to do, that you might be able to start to incorporate into your daily self as ways of valuing yourself because you can do it? People who can do things need to do those things. Like I developed, I've been able in my life to figure out the things that I'm able to do just as, in my own personal way. And it involves things like extremely organized. I'm good at putting things together. I know balance visually. I'm very good at visual balance. I'm actually a very good picture hanger. I don't even need a ruler. Now, this is not anything to write home about, but it's a skill. Like I've got some music skills, and I am able to play the piano. And every morning I practice the piano for a half an hour because it's something I can do. And what do the participation with these aspects of artistry give us? They give us that sense of satisfying the self's requirements of doing the things that it can do. Let's see, and I'm trying to think of other are there any other dependencies?
Generativity?
That would be originality.
Okay.
That's originality.
Okay. I think that's good.
That's a fair synopsis.
What I want to do is I want to shift to more about you and your life. And, this is not a project about theology, but when it's not obvious to me, I'd like to start with a question, which is, what are your spiritual beliefs? Like, do you have a concept of a higher power in your life, or what is it that plays that role for you?
I can talk about how I got there, maybe, if that would help. Well, I was born into a family in which, when I was a year old, my father was killed in World War II, the day after World War II was over, actually, in August the 17th, 1945. And he was in the Army Air Force, and left my mother a widow with two young children, a sister who was 3 years old at that time, and I was a year old. And my mother had married a man who had been from a German family in central Illinois, and they called themselves English Lutherans, which is sort of an oxymoron, because I think Lutheran defines German, but in World War II, of course, there was such a negative opinion about Germans in Germany that many of the Lutheran denominations put an English in front of their name, and this was the denomination that I was originally baptized in. Well, my mother had to go off on her own and start working, and she took us to her parents' religion, which were Methodists, and I was baptized as a Methodist when I was 4 or 5 years old, which was my second baptism. And then my mother remarried. She met a man and remarried a man when I was, I don't know, about 6 years old maybe. And she and that man joined the denomination called Disciples of Christ, which are also called Campbellites. And that's a liberal Christian denomination, in which involved my being willing and agreeing to a full immersion baptism, which was sort of pretty fun. I mean, the minister puts your head underwater, so it's like, wow. I mean, can I go any higher than that? I always figured I made it when I had my full immersion baptism. So that was I went to a church called Central Christian Church in Decatur, Illinois, and I got involved with the youth group, and I actually had a pretty good time. I was never able to get prayer. We were, you're taught to pray in church. You bow your head and close your eyes and pray. And if I tried to pray, I never got anything from it at all. I think it was like a buzzing in my head. It didn't go anywhere. In fact, made me yawn, which didn't seem like a good sign for me in my connection with spirituality. And I did try for a number of years, but at about the age of 15, I had seen enough hypocrisy in Christian denomination, which of course doesn't by any means rule out hypocrisy in other religions. But in my Christian upbringing, I found enough hypocrisy and really hatred of outgroups and clannishness, and I mean, everywhere you look, you saw religion owning religious groups owning the world, and I renounced my religion at that point, and I have not gone back into any formal religious mode ever since then. I think I probably had a lifetime up until 30 years old of not knowing really what to do with myself as far as my anxiety. I threw up every day until I was 30, every single day. I was an extremely anxious child. Not having a father is I would say, for a male, is a very difficult thing. I remember of my mother's cousin's husband. One time I had a small catcher's mitt and having him throw the ball at me once. That's the only time I ever remember an adult having anything to do with me in terms of trying to help me learn anything about any male activity. I was always told, I was always picked last for any sports activity. I was always told I threw a ball like a girl. You know, I always felt like I was a freak. If I asked for anything religiously, it would have been to make me invisible, just make me normal. I always felt like an outlier. Like I never really felt like I belonged. I managed to get by sheer force of will. My mother was unable to really care for me, but she did give me expectations that I think are quite interesting in terms of establishing a kind of a center for a child who is anxious and feeling really the outlier. She made it clear that my father was a star Boy Scout, at the level of star. There was Star, Life, and Eagle. My mother wanted me to be an Eagle Boy Scout. So that's what I set to work to do, to try to please my mother. She was a very disturbed person. She never really recovered from my father's death in terms of being able to grieve and release herself from it, and it killed her. At 48, she was dead. But I set out to get my merit badges, and when I was 13, I was able to get my Eagle Scouts, which kind of just goes to show you what I was programmed to do. My mother also said it's not a question of where you go to college, it's what kind of doctorate you get. So that, of course, defined my path from then on in, all the way up until I was 25 when I finished my PhD. So I guess I grew up by different goals that she had set that she wanted me to achieve. Not that she participated particularly in my achieving them, although I do remember she came to my, when I got my Eagle Scout, she did come to that meeting. I also took piano lessons, but I don't remember that she came to my piano recitals. My mother was just too debilitated by her own. She worked like a dog, and all she did was work and read novels and sleep and let the house go. So I became the housekeeper. I spent my life trying to help my mother, keeping things up, doing the dishes, mowing the grass, doing the things around the house that would make it easier for her, rubbing her back, trying to take things to her, bringing her blankets, anything I could do to try to help my mother was the name of the game for me growing up. And I think that is the basis of my deciding on psychology as my career. I knew at 11 that I wanted to be a psychologist, and I think it was because I had been practicing with her, trying to verbalize with her or get her to verbalize, which was so difficult for her. But trying to comfort her, trying to help. That would really be what you could say my mission in life has been, is trying to help. I knew I wanted to be a clinical psychologist at the age of 11, if you can believe it. I'd never even met a clinical psychologist. This was back in 1955. Clinical psychology, I didn't want to be a psychiatrist. I've never had any interest in medication or treating situations through medication. I knew I wanted to get underneath the underbelly of the psyche. I always wanted to get down in what I call myself as a cellar dweller. Get down low and work and change the infrastructure. That's always been my interest in terms of therapy. And I've stayed that course, and it it was a gift that I was given by having a situation like I had with my mother, because it showed me what I could really do, because I was naturally gifted at this. The spiritual part of my life has been secular. I have a very, very, very strong belief in aesthetics. Beauty in whatever form it may be, whether it's in the spoken word, whether it's in the human body, whether it's in the in the senses I mentioned before, in the sense of balance, visual balance, in the form of actually literature, music, art. Any of these things are where I worship, and I can say that without any apology, that as I've mentioned to you before, as we are all worshiping all the time something in terms of having a dependency upon it, which is a form of worship, I worship at the shrine of beauty. And I stayed there all my life, and my environment, I think, reflects that I always am interested in trying to live in an environment that is crisp and balanced. That gives me, when I'm living in a sense of balance, it gives me a sense of clearness in the head that I can think. I feel very much emptied out when I'm in harmony with nature. So that absolutely defines my sense of the spiritual. I'm also, I never was able to buy into the religious spirituality concept because of my, I think, rationalist orientation. I couldn't believe in magic. And religion has a lot to do with magic. It has to do with things that are happening that are not physically possible. As far as I've been able to tell, Christ ascending into heaven, these types of things, activities that just don't seem like they could have been possible, were always off-putting to me. And I think that's kept me from exploring a formalized religion. I also ask myself, very, very honestly, how and what kind of a God could be all-powerful and yet allow so much chaos in our lives? How can that be, that you would worship an entity who every day you see the most horrible, horrible things happening on this earth? I can't fathom it, and I can't justify it for myself. The closest I can come to justifying some Godhead kind of thing would be in the form of an entity or a dependency on an entity which could give you the strength to be able to deal with the world that we live in, which is so filled with chaos and ugliness and yes, beauty too. But I think that if I were to be religious, my God would be the God who gives me the strength to get through. That would be my real take on, yeah, I could go there if I could ever get there.
Can you remember the first time in your life you feel like you had to rely upon that belief that you had the strength to get through something?
I don't think I've ever really been able to believe it, because I think I've always had to give myself the strength. I don't think I've gotten the strength from others, from the other. Let's say the other. The God could be the other. People could be the other. My life has primarily been depending upon myself. I know that sounds awfully egotistical, but I think that I came to that point of view, if you will, by hard experience, that I couldn't really depend upon anybody else when I was growing up. I mean, depending on people. Oh, that's a hard one. I couldn't really depend upon my mother, although my mother gave me things to depend upon. I mean, in retrospect, but I had to figure my way through really on my own. I developed, I think, that methodology of using my civility dependency was mine from an early age. I always tried to treat people well. And I think I've gotten a lot of mileage out of it in my life. I can say, yeah, 95% of the time, if I'm on it with civility, if I'm on it with courtesy, I have a great time. So, that I did in terms of strength. I think I absolutely felt that growing up, that if I used that tool, or if I sided up to that dependency of civility, although I didn't name it that way, them just trying to treat people well, it would give me the kind of benefits that I needed. And I do think that has worked out for me very well. But that's sui generis, or that's the originality dependency. I decided that had to be the path that I took that would work the best. So the strength that I have, I mean, I don't want to seem self-centered about it, but I can't really think of anybody who's ever really strengthened me that much. I have felt, primarily in my developmental history, I've felt used by people who I was giving my strength to, people that I was helping, my mother, my grandmother. I had a sister that I couldn't help, but I mean, it was largely me just trying to take care of things, and I've been doing that all my life. And you know something? I'm not any the worse for wear. I still enjoy doing it. I don't depend upon people. I had a great relationship for 41 years, which ended about 3.5 years ago with the death of my partner, and I pretty much took care of him, in many, many, many respects, and in some ways, he was taking care of me too. It was somewhat mutual, but I've always felt I had to take care of everything myself.
You spoke earlier about your calling, your mission in life. Maybe just talk about that for a minute. What do you feel has been the mission of your life?
Unequivocally, I think it's been that people benefit from my presence, and I derive great joy in being there for people in whatever way that I can, and it's largely been professional. I mean, I've done 7 hours of therapy every day for 40 years. I mean, all I've done is work. And again, I'm not complaining. I haven't been violated or abused by any statute. It's just this is what I've really found to be most interest. The best way I can do it is by helping and working with people.
Can you tell me about your journey being gay and how that has figured into your life?
Well, that's been a bitch. I don't think people even recognize that journey today. I mean, it's not the same journey for people that it was for, I'm 75 years old. It was a journey of horrendous fear as a child who most children know that there's something about them that is different from fairly early age. I probably knew when I was, well, kind of suspected maybe, although I don't think you really knew really knew, you can kind of think, well, there might be something going on, but it's not real. It's only a temporary condition. But being a child without a father, I was good friends with a boy my age, Johnny, who we went to church with me, and his mother was the secretary at the church. And we were good friends, just good friends. And he was the kind of person who I always knew was going to come to a bad end. He was the person who, when we went up to Lake of the Woods, Muhammad, to swim at this swimming in Illinois. There are no clean lakes. I mean, you swim in a lake that's dirty, okay? But he would go to the high board and jump from the high board into this lake and go down to the bottom of the lake and come back with a handful of mud. Anybody who does those kinds of things is a terrifically impulsive, risk-taking kind of individual. But he and we were great friends. I didn't think he was gay, or, I mean, you just didn't think about it, although we were asked by the organist at the church to go swimming with him at the YMCA. We were 14-year-old boys, and we went to the swimming pool. And this is, life without a father, okay? And one of the few times I was even around a man was this organist, and he unbeknownst to me, he dove in the pool, and then he came out on the other side attached to my penis with his mouth. I mean, it was a really, 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 really scary thing. I was so scared I couldn't function for 2 weeks. I was just totally almost paralyzed. And I even told my mother, which I never told my mother anything, but I was so upset about it. And so, of course, he was dismissed and left town. That was the end of that. There was no follow through. But that kind of thing was in kind of with me in terms of almost like a trauma that had attached to it a level of excitement that was unbelievable. And this is the kind of thing that I worked with many people in the SLAA, Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous groups, of people who have like a one trial learning of something that sticks with them, and they keep searching it out. And that became kind of a disgusting but nevertheless exciting fantasy of mine, which I carried around for a number of years, but all of which was extremely shameful. And when my friend Johnny and I, we played around one time, just playing around. And this was when we were maybe 16, and he confessed to his mother that he was gay when he was about 19 years old, maybe. And she wanted to know what sex he had had, and he said, well, I did it with Butch once. I think it's probably what my nickname is, Butch. I think I did it with Butch once. And she blamed me for it. And the next year, he committed suicide. And I don't know how to put it to you, but I obviously did not feel like it was my responsibility for his sexual orientation. I mean, I wasn't that stupid. But just the fact that people would think these kinds of things about me, or that you would think those kinds of things about people who were gay, it typified what I felt was going to be, what it was going to be like for me, being looked at in a peculiar way, being accused, being different. Let's see, my 20th high school reunion in 1982. No, maybe it was my 30th in 1992. I went back for my reunion, and everybody was jolly, and you'd hear from this one how wonderful their kids were, and then from that one, their house burned down. It was either feast or famine. The stories I was getting, and the chairman of the meeting had us all sit in a big circle, and everybody went around the circle and was to tell what was going on in their life, and I was the last one. And I said to myself, well, I wonder, should I do this? I mean, you cannot imagine how conservative and conventional Decatur, Illinois is. But I said, well, bite the bullet. And so I said, well, my name is Ed Lahniers, and let's see, that would be in 1991, 73. I'm going to say I've been with my partner, Stephen Birmingham, for 28 years, and practicing as a clinical psychologist. And my ex-girlfriend was sitting next to me, and she didn't even know. And afterwards, she said, I can't believe you did that. Well, I'll tell you something. It was interesting, the response of these alumni. People couldn't stop looking at me. And then they started taking pictures of me without my posing. Like the fucking freak, right? And it went on all afternoon, all evening, and the next morning at this breakfast, it was like I was being stalked by camera. And it was because I'm sure that they did not know anybody who had come out before. Well, anyway, that was the kind of thing, that being gay was about then. It was so, most people were so treated as such a shameful thing. I did not feel, however, ashamed of being gay. When my partner Steve and I got together in 1973, we decided that we were treating each other as married, okay? And we bought wedding rings. I bought him a ring in New York. He bought me a ring in New York. And we wore our wedding rings. And I moved in together. This was 1973. And I did not bow my head in shame. I said, this is what I am, and I'm going to do it. I'm not going to advertise being gay, but I am gay, and I've always used my own situation in therapy as appropriate. I can talk about being gay anytime you want, but I don't identify myself, as gay. I identify myself as Ed. I may be gay, but I'm not. That's not my identity. But I have very frequently used my experiences in therapy as a tool to help other people gain some confidence in how they can deal with the situations that are presented to them. I can't say that for 40 years probably, I haven't bought in, since I stopped throwing up maybe. How's that sound? That would be a pretty good due date. I think when I stopped throwing up, I stopped feeling bad about it because the whole environment was so absolutely intolerant of homosexuality when I grew up. Absolutely. That's why I left at 18. That's why when I lived in England, I had my first trip to England when I was 20, I met my first partner, who was an Englishman. He was a photographer, and homosexuality was illegal in England then. But anyway, I lived there for a year working, and I of course spent a lot of time with him that year, which was very good for us. But in the end, I didn't think living in England was where I belonged, and so I came to school at UC, and I used to walk all the way from my apartment about 3 miles to the only gay bar I knew about, and no one in my class knew about me. No one knew that I was gay in my graduate class. So this is just the life of hiding yourself and trying to avoid skirmishes, and it's a whole different. I mean, it was unbelievable when the Supreme Court ruled that marriage between same sex was legal. It was unbelievable how quickly that happened in a period of maybe 2 years. The whole, and I think this was, well, at least people say that it was probably in large part due to the response to the society's response to the HIV crisis, and that the gay population had to take it into their hands in order to be able to get the medication developed that would benefit them. So the gay population became a population that everybody knew about. You know, they were out there, and the gays didn't used to be out there. They used to be just thought of as being over there. Now they were out, and it's just been remarkable to see how much acceptance there has been. I mean, I'm not being fooled that a lot of people hate gays. No question about that. But I've never tried to surround myself with people that are, you know, intolerant. I've always made it a point to try to hang out with people that had, you know, a sense that everybody should be welcome to the party. Probably myself. That I've been able to self-determine a path that has given me an enormously satisfying life. I can't tell you how grateful I am every day to have been able to work, to have been able to have had a terrific partners, the people that I know that are just absolutely fabulous in my life, and it's what I've done. I mean, I'm not gonna. I mean, my grandmother influenced me, no doubt. My mother influenced me, no doubt. But when you're getting down to it, the only person when you're really on your own, and I've always been on my own, you've got to do it yourself, and I've done it myself, and so I'm grateful for me. That I not end up in a nursing home, that I am dead before that, so that I die at the right time, because I'm 75, so, you know, it's a kind of a different game now. I don't feel like I'm 75, and I don't live like I'm 75, but I know that age is going to catch up with me, and I was fortunate enough to be able to take care of my partner during the time that he was ill, and we were in New York, and I was able to be there always for him, to see him through to the last breath, which he took with me, which was a real blessing. And I would hope that I would be able to go in some way that not leave me infirm and dependent upon other people to wipe my ass. I should have a message for people. I sit with people all day. The message that I usually have for people is, let me know what you need, and I'll tell you whether you can have it. My message comes out of assessing what's in front of me. So I don't generate a message generally, except just let me know what's going on, and I'll try to figure out a way that you can do it better. I guess I guess that might be it. Let me help you do it better. That might be my message. So you see how my life has been enmeshed with my work.
Actually, normally I wouldn't do this in an interview, but you've already told me what your message is. So I'll remind you. It's to your message and your work is to help people avoid self-created pain.
Absolutely, absolutely. I guess I was kind of saying that in a bleak way. That yeah, I mean, my message is to help people get over. Oh yeah, oh, without any question. Yeah, but I have to get you to give me what you need first. That's where I was coming from with that. I mean, I want to get you there, but I don't know what you need to be got. I don't know the exact terms. But when you come in and you let me know what's going on with you, and I find out what your negative dependencies are, and I start matching you up to what I know the criteria for a well-functioning self are, I'll begin to work with slotting you in on those, right? That's what I'll do. So yeah, I'm out for you. I'm out to grab you.
Do you remember the portrait we made of you at the piano?
Mm-hmm.
When I show that to people, what would you like them to know about you?
I'd like for them to hear me play, because I can play. I'm not just posing.
Okay, we'll go up to the piano in a minute. How do you stay so patient with change being so slow for people? How do you?
That's good. That's a very good question.
How do you work knowing that it's going to be slow, or
that's a very good question.
May never come to be?
Yeah, I think my predictability tool, that my predictability dependency works to my advantage, and that is in my assessment of what's going on, I'm trying to get a picture of what's possible in terms of the personality structure of the person who's coming in, the financial structure, the variables that go into making a decision, but the fallibility, predictability. And when I get an impression of what's possible, well, you won't find me throwing my hands up. But if I don't think that it's possible because of my assessment, I'm not going to waste a lot of time. I'll in some way work it around so that there's an early release, so that the individual not waste his time and money, because a lot of people really don't want what I have to offer. And in the particular of a person who is in the ballpark of making changes and having the motivation to do that, I've got all the patience in the world. I am extreme, but I'm only patient with the situation that warrants it. My motto: I'm only as good as my material. And if you don't have good material that you're working with, and that's your assessment issue, to make sure what you're working with is of a sort that can move forward. But that allows me to. I mean, I've worked with people for years, and I love it. I love it. We'll get there, by hook or by crook.
Is there anything else you'd like to share?
Well, you and I have had this is between you and me. We're talking, and this is a very intimate thing that you and I are involved in here. But you and I have had a very, very, very fruitful relationship over the many, many years, and I personally am so gratified that you and I are now becoming friends, and doing some things together that friends do post our relationship is in a therapy way. That it's just it's one of those marvelous things that has happened. That since you've come back, I'm really glad you're settling in the way you are. And may we continue to refresh ourselves with various cocktails and events in the future.
Thank you for all the gifts you've given me.
You're most welcome. And the gifts you've given me are to be thankful for too.
Thank you. Should we go watch you play the piano?
Sure. Sure.
Tell us what piece you're going to play.
I'm going to play Over the Rainbow. Since we're celebrating the 50 years of Stonewall and we've got a rainbow flag, why don't I play it? It's also a lovely song, isn't it?
Bravo.
Good enough.
Bravo.
Good enough.
Thank you.
I love the sound of this piano. It's got a great tone. It's alto. You can see, you can hear it, can't you? Compared to a Steinway.
Yeah.
You know how bright the Steinway sounds? This is smooth operator. This is Sade.